You Are What You Eat twin experiment on Netflix is a prime example of fake research to trick us into eating garbage. This documentary-style video is supposed to present the results of a twin study comparing two different diets. But actually, 80% of the 4 hours is an infomercial for vegan products. Your ability to tell the difference between real research and propaganda is the only layer of protection that's between you and big corporations who obviously have deep enough pockets to be able to afford to produce this type of emotional manipulation to get you to eat foods that damage your body. And I want you to understand that that's exactly what this is. They're using psychology against you to trick you into acting against your best interests by presenting sad stories. And honestly, sad stories that are aimed to solve a problem that could absolutely be solved without harming our health. I'm going to use timestamps for the specific examples that I'm referring to if you want to go and look at the original footage. But I can tell you how frustrated, annoyed, angry that I was that I couldn't get through 3 minutes of this video series before I had to stop to take notes. The first thing I want to point out is they try to convince us that because they're twins, they are identical, even at their adult age, and therefore they can put them in different groups, so 2 different diets, and the results are going to speak volumes. I want you to understand that that's not true. If the twins were actually identical, then they would have weighed the same, been exactly the same height, and they clearly were not. And that's because no 2 twins are completely identical. They have personalities, they have preferences, and those things play out in their interaction in the world. And so they're not going to eat exactly the same, and their bodies are not going to be exactly the same. Because they're twins, they try to say that this is the perfect experiment. The perfect experiment would have been what Ansel Keys did, where he compared the same person to themselves. Normal diet, fed them too much, fed them too little. Also, because they're sending them home with the food rather than having them have the food in-house, again, not the perfect experiment. So there are a lot of flaws in this experiment, but they're normal flaws. They didn't have to present it as if their experiment was perfect. That's just a way to make us believe that whatever results they tell us at the end, we can't argue against it. But Wellness Warrior, we can, because this experiment wasn't perfect. Okay, so then they turn around as they're describing the diets for them and tell them that they have a super cool diet and a crappy diet. Again, setting us up to believe that one of these diets really is just not healthy. Why are we even comparing them then? Of course, we find out that the diet that we're doing is vegan versus omnivore. An omnivore diet means that you're just eating all the things. That's the standard diet. However, they do point out that their plan is to feed both sets of people healthy foods. I did find it interesting that when they told the participants that they were only going to get healthy versions of both diets, one of them said, well, then they're both lousy diets, right? I think it's helping us to understand that they're portraying that this group of people does not believe that if you're eating healthy food, that can be a tasty diet. Again, setting us up for what I think at the end is a point they're trying to make, that the vegan diet, as we now know that the 2 diets are vegan and omnivore, the vegan diet is going to be this delicious diet that everyone just comes around and loves. A few minutes later, one of the participants says that if steak wasn't unhealthy to eat every day, that's what they would do. Again, giving us a clear message of which diet is the lousy diet, which diet is the unhealthy diet that we should be trying to get away from, even though they haven't even begun the experiment yet. They showed a little bit of each person's life with food before they start their diet. And they showed one of the ladies getting a plate of food, and it had rice and some kind of meat on it. And what I thought was interesting was how much rice compared to how little meat was on it. I just want to point out that 60 years ago, before the whole well, maybe even 7 years ago by now, but before the whole low fat thing came, that piece of meat would have been much bigger, right? We were not eating very small, minuscule amounts of meat before the low fat craze came into being. And if you notice, a few minutes later, they show an image from the 60s, I believe it was, where they're making a child's plate, and the meat portion on that child's plate was bigger than that adult had on her plate. So it's something for us to understand. Why are we overweight today? There's some hints in some of the things that they're showing in this video. Of course, they have some very important people in the video to prove to us how important this message is that they're trying to get across to us. So they have this senator. The frustrating thing about the senator's message to us was that he talks about food deserts, but glosses over the fact that food deserts happen because there are no grocery stores in the neighborhoods he's talking about. Those neighborhoods tend to be non-white, poor neighborhoods. No grocery stores. A little bit further along, another expert is comparing San Bernardino to Loma Linda. San Bernardino has one of the highest poverty rates in California, whereas Loma Linda is actually 23% higher in their affluence than the national average, right? So they're a rich county. And they try to blame the better health of Loma Linda on the fact that they are church-going people who eat a mostly vegan lifestyle. Vegan, they have all this vegetable and hardly any meat in their diet. Rather than maybe blaming it on the fact that you're comparing poor people to rich people, rather than comparing it to the fact that San Bernardino is one of those places that has food deserts, where Loma Linda has an abundance of grocery stores and places to buy fresh food. They also went as far as to claim that people in Loma Linda barely eat any meat. They just have a little bit once in a while. Obviously, in the experiment, everybody wanted to be omnivore, kind of showing that nobody was interested in this vegan diet thing. And they really pushed it. Like, everybody was railing against it. There wasn't anyone who was like, oh, this could be fun. And I feel like, again, they're trying to show us that by the end of this video, they're going to convince all these people, they're going to convert them. They're going to be lovers of vegan. That's my prediction. Again, I haven't gotten to the end of the video when I was making this prediction. I wrote all this stuff down. They're setting us up to be surprised at how wonderful the vegan diet is. They did say something that I thought was really interesting. They talked about the impact of cheese on the body, dairy, I guess, on the body. And the fact that when we eat it, we release a hormone called Quesal morphine. And it's a feel-good hormone that gets us to really just enjoy dairy products. There's some belief that Quesal morphine would be a positive thing for us to have, because when we're breastfeeding our babies, it would keep them, first of all, drinking enough to get strong, but also connecting to mom. I found that out not from the video. I did some research. But in the video, they basically say that this is why we are all addicted to dairy products and we chase it, and that basically it's not a healthy thing to be happening, which I could see that too, because when I was making my cheese crisps to eat with my meals before I found out that galactose wasn't good for, the liver, I could see where I was, intense in making it. I always wanted to have it. So there was probably some chasing happening there. I'm very happy that they mentioned this in the video. I wish they would have mentioned that galactose is 90% metabolized in the liver. They didn't mention that part. The problem that I have, though, is that a few seconds after telling us about Quesal morphine, they turn around and blame the problem of cheese on the saturated fats. It's frustrating that they're willing to lie about things that are verifiable. The first one that I noticed was when they said that most populations in history did not eat meat or dairy. And if they ate it in very small amounts. This contradicts everything that we know about why humans' brains are as large as they are. All the scientists are pointing at the fact that we ate meat And all the fat that, like, we were eating the entire animal, nose to tail. That's their belief of why our brains, like, got this as big as they did. But yet somehow, according to these scientists and these experts, we barely touched meat in our history, in the history of people. That wasn't a thing. It was funny when we watched this because Pat pointed out that when we were hunter-gatherers, were we out there, chasing lettuce with our spears? No, we were chasing animals. And also when you watch videos where they're showing historical stuff or recreating historical ideas, like, for example, Game of Thrones, their table isn't full of vegetables. It's full of meat because that's what would have been eaten back then. But apparently, no, we were eating vegetables. They leave things in the movie that contradict what they say. So at one point, they have the two male twins, the young guys, talking about how different they are, which absolutely contradicts the intro of the video talking about the fact that they're identical and the same. And that's why this is the perfect experiment. So I was confused by them leaving that in, but there are other things that confuse me as we go through this. One thing that caught my attention, and I don't know if this is on purpose or not, but both sets of women were obese, and both sets of men were in the healthy range, and the young men were quite buff. I wondered about why they would do this. I don't have any I just wanted to point it out because I feel like they're looking to prove something. And again, I don't know what the end of this video, like at this point of me writing this, I didn't know what the end of the video was going to bring, but it caught my attention. Women are the ones who make the decisions about meals and all that stuff. So I wasn't sure if that was the reason that the ladies were the ones that had really a lot of weight to lose. And maybe they're hoping that the vegan diet is going to help them just lose a lot of weight and it's going to push all of us women to want to lose weight. And maybe they're thinking it's going to help the men gain muscle. And that's, I don't know. And then they start talking about the food that we're eating and why they believe that, the vegan diet versus the omnivore diet, like the differences between them. And when they're talking about the omnivore diet, they combine all animal products and processed foods into the same category, right? And they say that that's why we get visceral fat, because we're eating processed meats and likely whole meats are doing the same thing. That's, again, misinformation. Another thing that frustrated me is that when they were showing the meats, the cooked meats, they were often fried. And when we go to a restaurant, we get fried food, they're usually fried in seed oils. Yes, those kind of fried meats are going to cause visceral fat, 100%. We know that seed oils cause insulin resistance. Information that, again, they don't talk about. Then they say that twins' microbiome is more similar because they're twins. That's actually false. Our microbiome is based on what we eat. If I change my foods today and eat different foods for a month, my microbiome will change. Your microbiome is reacting to the foods that you actually ingest. So that was just a completely false statement. And it is true that when they put one twin on one diet and the other twin on the other diet, if they adhere to the diets, then yes, their microbiomes will now diverge. But I'm going to put it to you that their microbiomes, if they are similar because they eat similarly. And just logic would tell us that from what we learned at the beginning of the video, they do spend a great amount of time together. They all seem to work together in some capacity, except for the one that was a teacher. They seemed like they had different jobs. And so therefore, of course, if they're spending so much time together, they're eating similarly. They're probably eating the same meals because they're eating together. More lies. She actually says that if you don't eat plant matter, your microbiome will eat you. Wellness Warrior, we've known Dr. Barry pretty much is carnivore according to what he says. Dr. Baker has been carnivore since I started watching him. There are so many carnivore doctors out there who are still with us and they're not eating vegetation. So that's just blatantly not true. I've gone 2 months without eating a piece of vegetation and I never had a stomachache. I never felt unwell. It's blatantly untrue. I love the fact that they admit that Alzheimer's and dementia is a dietary problem. But again, blaming it on fat in the next breath It is true that our body needs and our brain needs clean energy, but ketones are actually the clean energy, not sugar. And again, we've known that, right? But they're implying that it's fat that's causing Alzheimer's, not the healthy fat that comes with your meat. Maybe those seed oils, yes, but not the healthy fat that comes with your meat. The lead on this research had some very interesting stickers on his laptop. And then we get some nice images of the negative impact of farming on the planet, on the environment. Just, explaining to us how horrible farming is. One thing that Pat pointed out is that by putting each of the participants on an exercise routine, they're kind of confounding the results, right? Because if we're trying to understand if the diet is making an impact, then we shouldn't be adding a second variable, which is exercise. Now, you and I both know that exercise isn't going to have a huge impact on their weight in an 8-week period of time, but the average person who's watching this kind of information wouldn't know that. So Pat was right in that it's going to just confuse people. And we're finally into the second video. Okay, it moves a little bit faster from this point going forward. Pat pointed out something that I almost missed. Well, I did miss it. He pointed out to me. They show one of the vegans' meal, and it was a plant-based chicken. So it's okay to eat processed vegan food, but it's not okay to eat processed standard American diet food. Somehow that's different. And even though they started this entire video off saying that they're going to give only healthy foods to both sets of people, when the omnivores are making their breakfast, there are sausages, which is processed meat, in their breakfast. So they didn't actually give them just healthy, clean food. So there was a lot of propaganda against eating animals. And Pat pointed out that they don't talk about the deforestation that is happening for our vegetables, right? Because clearly that's not impacting the animals in the forest, right? I did like that they showed that the cattle can be raised in a healthy and a sustainable way. I like that they exposed that most cattle is not grass-fed, grass-finished. As a matter of fact, they showed that they were on dirt. There wasn't even a piece of vegetation for them to eat that was natural. And Pat did predict that they wouldn't speak about pesticides that they spray on our vegetables so that they can be greener and larger and all the things, and also to keep the animals away from eating them. And he was right. At no point did they talk about the pesticides that they put on our vegetation. And he pointed out that they were blaming the cows for the climate increases instead of the cars and planes and transportation, or even us humans who do fart. We're not getting blamed for that methane gas that's out there. It's only the cows. In the third video, this twin study turns into a video about how a meat restaurant transitions to a vegan restaurant. I'm not at all sure what this has anything to do with the twin study. The twins didn't go there. It had nothing to do with anything. Just more propaganda and commercials for how great veganism is. Now we're into the part where the twins need to buy their own food. And they show them shopping for vegan food for themselves. And it looks like mostly processed foods. We can't eat processed meats, but they can eat processed everything. There was a farmer talking about the chicken farm that he had, and he pointed out that the birds were so tightly packed together in the farm, and it was breaking his heart. He was so sad about it, that the birds became sick and they were weak, right? But then he turned around and he said that it wasn't the environment that they were living in. It was their genetics that was causing them to be sick and weak. That's not likely. It's much more likely that is the situation that they're in. If they can't fly, if they can't run around and get exercise, then of course they're going to be weak. And then they try to show us that they actually think we're dumb. And this was the part I was just like, this can't really be happening. They want to prove that eating meat is so dangerous, you're just going to put germs all over your house. Because we're just idiots, right? So what they do is they coat the chicken in glow germ, and he has it all over his hands. He touches everything, puts it in the fridge, touches the fridge handle, touches stuff in the fridge, and then has the female twins come in to cook a meal. And of course, they go and they take the bowl, which has glow germ all over it, out, they make the meal and they're washing their hands between touching the chicken because they know that you don't want to get chicken germs all over the kitchen. And then they come and, use one of those glow lights to show them where the glow germ was all over the place. I don't know, again, if they think we're that dumb. They showed us, the scientists, touching the bowl, touching the fridge, touching the everything, but then want us to believe that the glow germ didn't wash off when they washed their hands. I verified, because I was like, is it possible that it just doesn't wash off? It washes off. They touched it again after they washed their hands. They touched the fridge door. They touched the stuff in the fridge because the scientist touched those things when he put the chicken away. This setup of the twins I thought was so ridiculous because they contaminated the kitchen and then blamed the twins for having contaminated the kitchen. The point of properly cooking your meat is actually to kill E. coli, first of all. The point of washing your hands is to wash away the E. coli. The twins did both things. If they cooked the meat to the right temperature, the E. coli is gone. It's very frustrating because people are going to be afraid. If they didn't see what I saw, if they didn't notice what he did, people are going to be thinking, my gosh, even though they washed their hands, it was still on their hands. That's what people are going to think. I have to say that Pat was on fire today. He kept noticing things that I wasn't noticing. I think because I was just too angry. But they said that you should use spices to make things delicious. And Pat pointed out that it isn't about taste. It's about the foods that they're asking us to eat are just way too carby and going to ruin our health because the carbohydrates are going to damage our internals and cause our insulin to rise and cause us to have damage and weight gain. Pat also pointed out that they don't show how industrial gardening and deforestation for human crops is also ruining the planet. And then we have some propaganda about fish and showing how, I do probably believe them that the way that fish are farmed is unhealthy and not great for the fish. The conclusions, I'm not so sure. So real cheese is a problem, but fake cheese isn't. Wellness Wire, everything that they're telling us to pay attention to be scared of, but the thing that they're telling us to eat that's healthier is processed food. We already know that processed food isn't healthy. They say at the beginning of the video that processed food isn't healthy, but then they're pointing us towards processed food. Cashew farming, despite being okay for the environment, is horrible for humans, right? The workers aren't paid enough. They don't have the proper equipment that they need to be safe while they're doing their job. They're exploited. So we can't mistreat animals, but we can mistreat humans. This is what they're telling us, right? It goes back to that whole idea that it's okay for there to be food deserts in neighborhoods where, there are certain people, but heaven forbid we mistreat some animals. What is wrong with us? And I'm not saying to mistreat animals. Why are we not caring about the people? Oh, man. When the trainer said that he's always wanted to know how someone would benefit from a different source of fuel, Pat almost fell off his chair. Both sets of people were being fueled by carbohydrates. They were both eating a high-carb diet. When you're eating a high-carb diet, your body is being pushed by carbohydrates. It doesn't have access to your ketones. It was a hilarious moment in the video. Again, the fourth video begins with a bunch of propaganda. I have to say, it was really hard to get through this video. So much of it was a commercial for veganism, and so little of it was about the actual participants in the study and the results that they were getting. And some of the statements that they were making were just so ridiculous. Do you want to save the planet or do you want to destroy the planet? Right? And that was based on food, not based on the cars and the technology and the packaging that we throw all over the place. They keep using our emotions to get us to choose vegan, despite the fact that over the long run, our health would suffer. Like, they don't care about our health in the long run. They are doing experiments to figure out how to hook us on the fake versions of foods, right, that we got sick on. And all of this to save the planet. Right? 2 minutes into the last video, they're talking about designing a product for us to eat versus giving us a healthy food. They're designing a product. That's very specific language, Wellness Warrior. And I want you to listen to the language that they're using in this video, right? These aren't whole foods that they're encouraging us to eat. They're not saying go and pick some vegetables and eat that. They're saying we are making these designed foods for you. They're using our desire to have traditional garbage against us. I want you also to pay attention to how they measured the participants differently. You know, the vegan versus the carnivore. Sorry, the vegans versus the omnivore. They measured the omnivore over his shirt, whereas they measured the vegan under her belly. So like not the widest part, under. Like there's a big question mark of why a meal that's not healthy in the standard American diet is going to be seen as healthy because it's made with vegan products. That's still a burger and fries. It's still unhealthy. Those fries are still the same. They're still bread. So only thing that we've changed is instead of having burger patties, we have mushrooms. And then the lie. The dude actually said that he made pork, chicken, and beef. That's a blatant lie, right? You made imitation flavored vegetables that taste sort of like pork, chicken, and beef. But they don't have the same amino acid profile. They don't have the same nutritional value for our body. They are not the same. Just because you're giving us the sensory sensation of something doesn't mean that it's giving our body the same health benefit. And again, they're playing on our desire to still eat the foods that we love, right? We want to eat meat. We want to eat poultry. We want to eat these things. And they're trying to make us believe that we can eat these fake versions with zero impact on our health. And I'm trying to get every wellness warrior to see that that's just not true. And by the way, food is not supposed to be for fun. It's supposed to be fuel and building blocks for the body. They're playing on the fact that we keep eating for fun, and they're using it to pull us into a new trap. They're trying to help people to swap out whole foods for processed foods without compromise. So what that means is that your health deteriorating isn't a compromise. Does that make any sense to you? Because it doesn't make any sense to me. And by the way, Koji, I looked it up. And what it said was, the magic of Koji is that it's like a bunch of little molecular knives dicing up everything into small bite-sized pieces so that there can be a greater chance that it will be the right size and shape to fit into one of your taste receptors. That's what Ali Bouzari said from the book, We Have the Technology. These things allow food to be hyper palatable, which is just a fancy word for addictive, wellness warrior. There's so much propaganda and advertisement and effort to convince us that eating vegan is easy and healthy and good for the planet. Now, this isn't about whole foods. It's an advertisement for impossible foods and whatever the vegan cheese woman's company was called. By the time we get to the results, we get some more slaps in the face because Charlie lost 0.5 pounds of muscle and 2.8 pounds of fat. He's the vegan guy. But his brother was stable and he actually gained a bit of muscle. The trainer tries to explain away the fact that Charlie lost muscle mass, like if it wasn't a big deal. But in fact, wellness warrior, I want you to understand that that's a huge deal. You don't go on a diet to lose muscle mass. Muscle mass is important. Muscle mass is what helps us to live longer. And he went on a diet and lost muscle mass. We need to keep in mind that every person who goes on any diet that doesn't involve junk food loses weight. If you move away from the standard diet to a cleaner diet, you lose weight. And then, of course, we go back to the part where they found vegan cookies and vegan junk food. So I don't even know if that qualifies at this point. I'm not even sure. Pam, was the vegan one, lost 7 pounds of muscle. Her sister lost 3.8 pounds of muscle, but she gained 0.3 grams of fat. The trainers turned around and said that her body took the muscle that they were building and used it for energy because they didn't eat enough, right? They didn't eat the provided foods. Yeah, this ignores that they did eat, wellness warrior. This was kind of one that to me didn't make any sense. It's not that they didn't eat for 2 weeks, or 8 weeks or however long. They just didn't eat the food that they were asked to eat. which means they did a standard diet, and then they turn around and they exercise like crazy because they were trying to still lose weight, right? Because they're in this program. Which goes back to what I said earlier about the fact that it's not the perfect experiment because people can cheat and people can just not do what they're asked to do. Their explanation for their weight loss and for their muscle loss was that their body used up their muscle because they didn't eat enough and they didn't eat the right things and all this stuff. I want to point out that according to Dr. Fung, first of all, it takes 6 months to slow our metabolism. So 8 weeks is not enough time for their metabolism to have slowed. But he also points out that our body is not so stupid that we have fat on board that is going to take muscle. It just doesn't do that. I think, and not a doctor, I'm just throwing an idea out there, they exercised more than they were told to. They were jumping rope and doing all kinds of things extra that they weren't supposed to. And I think that they lost water weight. They just were sweating more. And they ended up losing some weight because they didn't lose any body fat. They lost muscle, but your muscle holds water, right? And so anyways, I don't think this, but I'm guessing. I don't know the answer. But almost every single one of these people lost muscle. While I was editing this video, it occurred to me, and there's another explanation for why people might have lost muscle. Maybe the people were just a bit too tired to work out the way that their omnivore counterparts were able to work out. It's kind of like when you get sick and you're on the couch for weeks. I know when we had the big C and I was on the couch for more than a month. When I was able to get up and go back to my life, I felt so weak and I'm sure I must have lost muscle. Anytime that we're not able to move around and do our normal activities, we're not using our muscles as much. And of course, we can lose muscle mass. After 2 months, could they possibly have lost some muscle mass? And I feel like that could help explain why almost everybody in the vegan side lost muscle mass. Another thing, though, that I was thinking about is, what about building muscle mass? Like, we need protein to build muscle, and we need the right proteins. We need the right amino acids to build muscle. So if I'm eating a vegan diet, is it also possible that I'm not getting the right profile to build muscle? And so that might have a big impact in how much muscle I can either build or the fact that I lose muscle even though I'm working out. Question marks. Not a doctor. I'm just throwing ideas out there because I want us to consider that there might be a reasonable explanation for this, but at the same time, we need to, and I feel like it's interesting they presented this information truly, that they lost the muscle mass, but the reasoning that they gave for losing muscle mass, according to Dr. Fung's explanations, just don't make sense. Carolyn lost 8 pounds, 5 fat, 3 lean. Again, there we go. Her sister, 7.7 of fat, lost 0.2 lean. And they blamed her not going to the gym to work out. So Carolyn, the vegan, of the reason that she didn't lose enough. And Pat pointed out something that I thought was really interesting. Because he was talking about the fact that omnivore people are still eating fat. So even though they're eating too much carb, they're still eating more fat. And therefore, when their body is storing, it's not just storing fat, like from the carbs. It's also storing the fat from the meat or the whatever fat that came in front that they were eating. It makes sense that the vegans are not putting on any as much visceral fat as the omnivores are because they have so much fat coming in as well, right? They're storing fat and sugar. And finally, we get to those young guys that were 11% body fat at the beginning of the study. And the trainer immediately discounts the 0.01 pound of visceral fat that the omnivore lost. I know that for me, when I try to lose weight, and for many people, when they're trying to lose weight and they get down to that last little bit of weight, especially if they're doing a normal diet, getting that weight off your body is crazy. It's hard to do. And this kid lost visceral fat. He had 11% body fat and still managed to lose visceral fat, and the trainers completely discounted it. Why? Because his brother, so the vegan, 0.34 pounds of visceral fat, which is an impressive amount. But the meat eater gained 7.1 pounds of muscle, which is what his goal was. He wanted to put on some muscle. And they said, yeah, that's pretty good. His vegan brother put on 2.3 pounds of muscle, and they were celebrating. Again, do we see the lean in this video? Now, there were some other tests that were run and done for the ladies. They had a test about their libido, and both sets of ladies, their libido went up. I didn't really see the point of that, except, to show that, hey, you're going to be more sexually active. Terrific. I think it's good for them if that's what happens. I did find it interesting that when they came in for the first test, they were not told that that's what was going to happen. And so I could see where if I go in and I don't know that that's what's going to happen, and now I got to put this device on my genitals and I have to sit there and watch videos that both sets of women were surprised. One set was like, we don't watch that kind of stuff. Another set was like, this is not the kind of stuff we watch. Then that surprise / not having access to what I like is going to have an impact versus the second time in, I'm not surprised. I know what to expect. And the second time around, the ladies who didn't have what they were looking for was able to get what they were looking for. I definitely think that had an impact on the outcome. And then there was a bunch of other results that I feel like a doctor would be better to talk about than myself. So I'm going to leave the rest of the results alone. Many people are going to wonder why I took the time to go through this video series and point out the psychological manipulations and the lies shown in this infomercial. I think that there's a belief that no one would believe this, and that is obviously untrue. But, Wellness Warrior, we've seen many people watch these kind of videos and put down eating meat. And most of them don't resume eating meat until, there's a health issue or they're lucky enough to learn the truth from a trusted source like a doctor. Dr. Hampton pointed out that he was vegan for years, and he even introduced it to his family and his young kids because he believed it was healthy. So everybody can be brought onto this path. And that's why I'm going through this video, because I want you to see where this is an infomercial. If you're on the fence about what diet to choose to heal your body, to get your weight under control, and you end up seeing this video, you might be swayed by the disturbing way that our livestock is raised. And I want to change that. I want us to make our health decisions based on what's going to improve our health. And damaging your health isn't going to save animals. Because if you don't eat those animals, someone else is going to eat those animals, right? There's always more people to eat the animals. There's always more people to eat the garbage. There's always going to be people to eat the vegan food. The question is, where are you? So the person watching this video, Wellness Warrior, where are you going to fall? And I want to just point out that this is not about me not caring about our livestock, right? I care how our livestock is raised because that's the meat that I'm eventually going to eat. And that's the meat that's going to build my body. So of course I care about the way that our livestock is raised. I want it to have a healthy life before it becomes part of my life. But what we need to do is to take action that actually helps things to change without harming ourselves. The first thing I'm going to suggest to solve this problem is to stop buying processed foods. Every vegan product in this series was processed. Why should I switch from standard American garbage to vegan garbage? Don't do it. Just don't do it. Then you're going to find a farm that treats its animals humanely, and you're going to buy all your animal products from that farm. And yes, I know that's going to be more expensive. But if you buy those vegan products, they're more expensive. So if you would have been willing to buy the vegan products to save the animals, then I'm encouraging you to spend the extra money to purchase from a farm where you know those animals were treated well. You're going to save the animal and save your health. We need to find ways to bring awareness about the maltreatment of our livestock to the people who can actually do something about it. The one positive about this video series is that it showed that we need to be aware of the way our food is raised and processed. And Wellness Warrior, I want to know your opinion on this Netflix series. How did you feel about what you watched? Did you make it through the whole thing? Because I'll tell you, Pat wanted to quit after the first half of the first video. We need to protect the ones we love from this type of manipulation. So share this video. The share button is just below, right beside the subscribe button.